You're listening to the Lanterns Radio Network. We are the network dedicated to empowering the individual, illuminating the truth, defending American exceptionalism, and inspiring future generations. Stay connected and get involved at lanterns.buzz for great radio. Get commentary and news of the day. Lanterns.buzz.
Listening to the Bells of Liberty podcast, where freedom rings and the sassiness stings. Stay tuned for a little bit of sassy freedom.
Hello, and welcome back to the Bells of Liberty. Thank you for joining us tonight. I think I can speak for all three of us when I say we're excited the weekend is here, even though it seems like the fun just never stops these days. Tonight, we'll be diving right into the mess that is Charlottesville, why comparing Antifa to World War II vets is a slap in the face of their memory. The familiar but growing craze of doxing those who don't agree with a narrative has struck again. More on why it's becoming more and more popular with the left and only makes the fact our Constitutorial being on the Second Amendment this evening is more appropriate than ever. And, of course, no episode of ours would be complete without a brand new Ring the Bell. So, Sammy, why don't we get started with your story today?
Okay, so obviously, we know that what happened in Charlottesville over the last weekend was super crazy, and anytime ideologies clash, there seems to be a pattern of like this stupid behavior and just like verbal diarrhea that goes all over the social media sphere. And so while I think we all agree that white supremacists are idiots, the fact that last week we talked about the First Amendment and they weren't committing a crime, they were just offending people. They had a right to voice their stupid, ignorant opinions. And Antifa, or however you say it, had a right to their counter protests. But there's something that was like really been bothering me, and that's like making these moral equivalencies. So on Tuesday, the editor at The Atlantic made a comparison to Antifa and World War II vets because he was watching Saving Private Ryan, and he thought, hey, these guys were fighting fascists, and these guys are anti-fascist, so they're the same. And then another idiot, followed by even more idiots, started sharing this meme of the soldiers who were getting ready to storm the beaches of Normandy and Antifa at a riot. And there's a difference, guys, right?
Obviously.
The stupid. It cannot be measured with these people. There's no unit of measurement for it.
Well, and, like, I get that, like, they're, like, every human being tries to make their story, like, make themselves, like, the hero of their story and whatever. Because I've taught Bible study where I'm sitting and someone is trying to tell me that they're Job and they're just suffering for no reason. And I'm like, no, there's a reason. Your life's not, together. You're a mess. And there's a reason you're going through what you're going through. Or there's people who are like, I'm David and this problem's Goliath. So I've seen this not just in the political sphere of people trying to like put themselves in shoes that they would never fill. So I'm not really shocked by it, but like the Antifa crowd couldn't even shine the boots of the men of the Allied Forces. Like it just drives me crazy.
What kills me is that they like to compare themselves as these big, brave people going to battle to do the right thing. But if they really had to be put into a situation where they were storming the beaches of Normandy where you were pretty sure you're going to die, it's not even remotely the same thing. I mean, they're doing it from the safety of the United States, where they have a right to behave, even though stupidly. They have a right to behave like they're behaving as long as they're not physically harming other people. So there really is no risk to them to do what they're doing. Not to mention most of them cover their faces and don't actually like legitimately stand for whatever it is that they're standing for. I feel like a lot of these people are just using it as an excuse to go beat up some newspaper holders and knock over trash cans and stuff. I don't think they're actually doing it because they think they're doing the right thing. Whereas our men and women who fought in World War II and, did stuff to support, the cause, actually, had to leave home and put themselves at risk and potentially die for something bigger than them. And it just is, there isn't a comparison, and it irritates me to no end to see people post these things that it's like, oh yeah, it's exactly the same thing. And no, it's not. It's like, I can't even put into words how infuriating it is. It's not remotely the same thing. So stop trying to make it equivalent. It's not.
To me, the Antifas are the equivalent of like the big baby throwing a temper tantrum. Like, that's all you're doing. You're throwing a temper tantrum because you're seeing something that you don't like, something that triggers you, and you and all of your little friends that live in mommy's basement and probably have Cheeto dust in your fingers and on your computer keyboards because you're all keyboard warriors, and you all decide to go out there and just wreak havoc. And you proudly admit that you go and wreak havoc, that you're out there to destroy property and punch people in the face. I'm sorry, the soldiers that went and fought for our country and for Europe went out there to give up their lives for what was right. You people aren't willing to give up your life for what you think is right. It's you have no morals, and you have no real clear idea of what it is that you're doing. You're just going over there because you just like to punch people in the face, and it's going to make you feel better because someone said something that hurt your feelings.
Right. And like the other point that you talked about, like the feelings and being offended, the other half of this, moral inequivalency delusion is that, when something happens and the left decides they're offended by something, and then the right says, well, just how long is it going to be until you're offended by this? And then some idiot, usually Al Sharpton, says, I'm offended by this. And then there's calls for people to, take down statues and all this stuff. And then Nancy Pelosi, the dumbest human who's ever lived, is like, the Speaker of the United States should do something about this immediately. This is wrong. Meanwhile, she was the Speaker of the House for years, and all these things still existed, were still a problem, but she didn't seem to think they were a problem when she had the power to do something about
because
it.
They're not actually a problem. I mean,
exactly.
We'll get into this more, but it's just like they're looking for excuses to be offended now. I think this is why I get so irritated when people try to make the comparison between something that actually was what it was. World War II was a serious thing. People actually put their lives on the line to make bad things stop happening. People were actually dying in World War II. There was actual genocide happening in World War II. These people, on the other hand, think that this country is the worst thing on the face of the planet. Like, it should just be burnt to the ground because it's so terrible, because so many people are dealing with all these horrible things, when it's not even remotely the same thing. It's literally about how you feel, not because people are getting rounded up and thrown into internment camps or into, places like Auschwitz and Dachau and everything like that. It's literally because they don't like people having a differing opinion. And I don't know that they're actually fighting fascism. Is this country perfect? Absolutely not. Does it have problems? Absolutely, yes, it does. But it's not even remotely at the level that they seem to be making it out to be. Like, they have to go fight some battle when really they're fighting people's shadows. Oh, you said something that upset me. Oh, you disagree with me. Oh, you're conservative? That obviously means you're a bigot, and I'm going to have to hold it against you, and I'm going to beat you to death with it. Like, it's not even remotely the same thing. I just, whenever I see the news on this, I just want to scream at these people and be like, would you just go home? Take your ball, go home, and sit in your room for a while and think about what you're doing.
Go home and take a nap.
Yes, take a nap. Have you taken a nap today? Because you need one. Like, it's just obnoxious. And they're not actually getting people to change their minds. Mm-hmm. They're not doing anything that's actually encouraging people to come to their side, as far as I'm concerned. Because I would think that as a relatively, and I say this with air quotes, normal person. I know I'm not that normal, But I think I'm relatively normal, and I think I'm pretty level-headed on most things. If someone was looking at that as a way to share their argument and get me to come to their side and to agree that yes, what they're doing is for the right reasons, they're failing.
Mhm.
I don't think there's anything that they could do at this point that would make me think, yeah, you're probably right. We should fight all the fascists.
Exactly. So these are people that are honestly not open to dialogue. These are people that you can't, that honestly I find sometimes these are people that you can't reason with. You can't reason with. If you really wanted to create change, much to what you were saying, Jana, if you really wanted to create change, then you'd come in and you actually try and talk to these people and try and change their, not necessarily change their minds, because some people are going to be set in their ways. But if you can find somebody else that you can talk to and have that free exchange of ideas without being offensive, without being rude, without being violent to one another, you're able to have a conversation and at least air your grievances. And if you're looking to feel better, maybe that's what you need. You need to maybe outreach to people instead of punching them in the face and taking it out on a statue that's been in the middle of a village square for 100 years. And it really irks me that these Antifa people are just so dead set against erasing all of the history that triggers them and makes them feel bad. History is history. There's countries in this world that probably have worse history than ours. Like I think of South Africa and apartheid. These are things that need to be taught at school, at their schools, I'm sure, and it needs to be taught at school so that we don't repeat that same mistake again. We can't just gloss over it, and we can't use whiteout to eliminate it because someone was wronged. Yes, wrong things happen in this world, but why don't we learn from it, find ways to not do that again, and move on and be better people as a result of these bad things? But these people just keep rehashing the bad, and it's just going to continue generating more bad, and we're not going to get anywhere.
Well, and speaking of, history being what it is, Chelsea Clinton thought she was being especially astute this morning when she tweeted out that Satan rebelling was part of Christian history, but you don't see Christians erecting statues of Satan.
And I'm like, first of all, this is a woman. Did this person not say she denounced religion at the age of 8 when she found out abortion was considered wrong?
I thought it was 6.
So if anybody would have any idea what Satan's all about, just saying. Well, let me try to use your ideology against you. Let me try to use your religion against you. And you know what? We actually do have people that have erected statues to Satan. I'm pretty sure they're Satanists.
There's plenty of monuments in that I've heard in the news, monuments that have been built to honor Satan because there's a 10 Commandments monument or 10 Commandments statue or anything, half a block down the street. So, hey, since they can have it, then surely that means that we can have a statue to Satan or an altar to Satan. Trust me, I don't turn to Hillary Clinton to counsel me about anything having to do with Jesus. I think the only Jesus that she knows is someone who, manicures her lawn in her home in Chappaqua, New York.
Probably
Oh my
true.
gosh. Oh my gosh. I feel like we can't even move on from there. I think we have to go into a break. So stay with us, and we'll be back on the other side with more on this topic.
Bells of Liberty on the Lanterns Radio Network, and now we have Jana coming up with something interesting that's going on. Jana?
I don't know if interesting is the word I would use, but I think childish and pathetic probably would be better. I'm giving you all sorts of grief tonight. I know. I'm sorry.
I feel like Rocky needs my microphone to bring us back in. And now here's Jana with her topic. Gina, what is your topic? Oh, you guys can't see me. Okay, good. No one can see me. It's radio. I know.
Oh, it's been an evening full of joyous, joyous crap. Okay, so anyway. So it's not as if the idea of doxing is a new thing. I think we all are relatively aware of what doxing is. And if you aren't, I'll break it down for you. Essentially what it is people who have a problem with something you've said, or have a problem with what you believe, or just in general have a problem with you and feel it's necessary for the world to know all about you, take your personal information and put it out on the World Wide Web for people to find relatively easily so that they can either send you hate mail or show up on your doorstep to, you know, maybe light a flaming bag of poo on your doorstep or something on that lines. And essentially do what they can to ruin the person that they are targeting. And so this is not new. This is something that's, you know, since the web has really become what it's become, has become a thing for people to do, and especially if you are a progressive leftist. But this week in general has been no different. It seems to have kind of caused it to evolve into this witch hunt for people who are what they consider white supremacists, what's another word? Racist bigots that all need to be called out for what they're doing. Now, as we know, in Charlottesville, there was a white supremacist march. I lovingly call it the Grand Tiki March. What with the tiki torches, the Tiki Torch March, kind of has a ring to it. Anyway, there was a march. There were people claiming to be white supremacists that were marching on Charlottesville, apparently to make a point. What that point is, we won't know because we're not idiots. So I don't think we got our invitations to white supremacists. In fact, I think I'm the only actually white person in this group, and I didn't get my invitation. What the hell? I feel so left out.
I feel like you're qualified because you are really white.
I am really, really white. If it weren't for the fact I have freckles, I would just be pasty. So you'd think I would be getting something in the mail. Regardless, the Tiki Torch March took place over the weekend and this last week. And obviously there were pictures. And I guess what the left has decided is that because they're white supremacists, they need to be called out, which I don't necessarily disagree with. But the left's way of calling people out is, as I've described, is finding that person and utterly destroying them to the point that they cannot be successful in anything that they do. And this is felt particularly well by Assistant Professor Kyle Quinn from, I believe it's Arkansas State University. I didn't see that part in my article, but he works at a college in Arkansas. And what happened was he was accused by SJW super sleuths of attending the white supremacist Tiki Torch March on Friday. And of course, because he happened to look like a gentleman who was in a photo that was posted of the Tiki Torch March. The guy in the picture is wearing an Arkansas engineering shirt. He has a beard and he's wearing glasses. So being the geniuses that they are, the SJWs who were looking to tear someone down decided that they were going to take a look at the college's page to see if anybody looked familiar. And lo and behold, they found a gentleman who looked somewhat familiar to the one in the white supremacist march photo. And this happened to be Assistant Professor Kyle Quinn, who at the time was spending the weekend with his wife and some friends, actually doing normal, not white supremacy things. And yet, because again, the Columbos of the world have decided that because he looks like this gentleman, now his head needs to be on a platter. He needs to be fired from the college. He needs to essentially lose everything that he's ever held dear. He needs to be called out. And because he looks like this gentleman and no one actually bothered to dig into what he was doing over the weekend and find out for sure before accusing him of being a white supremacist, now people are actually sending him death threats. Death threats accusing him of being something he's not, accusing him of attending something he did not attend, telling him that he's a horrible person, that he should probably burn in hell because he's so horrible, even though this is not him. But do you think that anyone will put out an apology? Probably not.
No.
Because as we've learned from the Lena Dunhams of the world, it's not necessarily about getting the facts straight. It's about making people aware. We have to make them aware that there are white supremacists in the world. So even though he might not have been doing something, he still needs to be aware that as a white man, he's got so much privilege going on. He needs to be knocked down a notch. I'll leave it open to you guys. How far is too far? Obviously, I'm one of those people who's like, I don't even want the internet white pages to have my information. And it seems like every time you turn around, new websites like Spokeo and all these, like, you know, I don't even know. There's been a few that have popped up here and there that claim to be, oh, well, we've gathered this all from just internet stuff that you've already put out there. But it's like, I don't recall ever putting any of this information out there for people to see. I don't put my address on Facebook. My Facebook is locked down. My Twitter is open, but I never post anything about my work on there. I don't post, I mean, I talk about politics, but I don't really talk about like what party I've signed up under. And yet a lot of these websites have like the last 4 addresses I've lived at. They've had they have information about my politics that I've never agreed to share anywhere, that I don't recall saying it's okay to put out there. My phone number is available for people to find. So it's very difficult to be you on the internet, because you know if you say the wrong thing, someone's going to come after you and end you, because it's not about actually having a discourse with someone. It's about making sure that they are stomped into the ground and can no longer have the opinion they have unless it agrees with you 100%. And I think that's what doxing is being used for. So, ladies, what do you think?
Well, I put this on my personal Facebook page, but there have been like 6 or 7 times just random people on Twitter have asked me, like, hey, were you at the airport in South Carolina this weekend? I'm like, I've never been to South Carolina in my life. Like, no, I was not there. And they're like, I swear I saw you. I'm like, you don't even know what I look like. Well, I look way better on Twitter than I do in real life because I put makeup on and work my ankles, okay? If I'm at the airport, I'm there with like a messy bun, sweatpants, and flip-flops. Like, you're not going to recognize me from my Twitter picture in real life at the airport, okay? So, I mean, but, people are like, just think you look similar, or they find one feature that's the same. And you can, like we've seen, you can try and ruin someone's life just on an accusation these days. It doesn't even matter if it's true. So, yeah, I mean, I am not a fan of this. I feel like this is like the Red Scare, like, McCarthyism in today's world. Mm-hmm. So I just feel like I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan when Republicans do it to the rioter. No one's asking for your help. What business is it of yours to ruin someone's life?
It's like, to me, I want to say that all of this has gotten started, or got its start from the media. If there's one thing that I remember is remember when the Aurora, Colorado massacre happened in the movie theater, and the media quickly came out to try to identify a gentleman by the name of James Holmes. He had absolutely no relation to the James Holmes that committed the crime. The crime, and the media was just passing along this name, and we think that this person is associated with this group, and we think that this person is this person may be a concealed carry holder, or any kind of information like that they just think will fit that narrative. Then let's make him into this evil character, and let's just start dumping on this person. And I remember when the guy came out and said, like, that's not me. I was nowhere near there. So please stop associating my name with this action, because that's what he was starting to get. He was starting to get death threats and people calling him, his family members. What do you mean? Are you okay? What is this that you're involved with? And this has progressed now the left is using this tool against anybody that doesn't align with them politically, to what you were saying earlier, Jana, but now they're just using any kind of information to just destroy them. There was I was just going to say, and it's I think a lot of this is because we haven't held our journalists to account either, because actual journalists have been just as guilty of doing this as anyone else. And they, they'll report
instantaneously. As soon as something happens, we have to have that, we have to have that scoop. We got to get the story out now. There's no expectation for them to actually fact check, to make sure that what they're producing for people to take is legitimate. It's just, oh well, we'll get to it later. We'll post a retraction, or we'll put an edit on there that says, oh yeah, we got the wrong person. Sorry, whatever. Like, I mean, there's no accountability, and because people see that in the media, I think also helps them think, well, it's okay. Again, it's just for awareness. Even if this ends up being the wrong person, they'll probably do something anyway because they're white. So we just need to make sure that they're aware that they're white and privilegey. So it's just frustrating to see that. And, I've seen people who did not deserve to be doxxed. I mean, this happened just a couple weeks ago with the gentleman in England that supposedly pushed this woman almost in front of a bus. Like, there was video of it. They were jogging, or she was walking and he was jogging, and there's video of this guy pushing her into traffic, essentially, and almost getting hit by a double-decker. Well, they identified, and I'm using air quotes, they identified the guy as some like rich British person, and like people were freaking out on him about how he's this misogynistic, nasty person, and he tried to murder someone. And lo and behold, he was in America while this happened. So he wasn't even responsible for it. So this is, like, we see it in the media, we're seeing it with people. It's not about changing people's hearts and minds like they like to claim. Hearts and minds. No, it's about utterly destroying someone until there is nothing left of them, so they can no longer speak, or they're too afraid to, because they don't want to drag their family into it. There was her username is Communism Kills. Her name is Ashley. She's a blogger. Very, very dry wit. And either last year or 2 years ago, I can't remember exactly, this happened to her. She said something that SJWs didn't like, which is quite frequent with her, but they really didn't like it. And they released her parents' address. And people were going after her parents. They didn't even say anything. They weren't even involved. And people were threatening her parents and going after her boyfriend and where he was working to get him fired because he was associated with her. So obviously if he's associated with her, he's just as bad, right? So it's not about making people change their minds. It's not about making things better. They literally feed off of this mob mentality, and that this person deserves it because they're so horrible. Even my worst enemy, I wouldn't do this to. It's just obnoxious.
It's like, honestly, I don't think there's any low that they're not capable of reaching in order to just destroy someone until you change your thinking into what they deem is appropriate. Anyway, we are at time, so we are going to be taking a break right now, but we'll be back. And after the break, we'll be doing our Constitutorial. Stay tuned.
You're listening to the Lanterns Radio Network. We are the network dedicated to empowering the individual, illuminating the truth, defending American exceptionalism, and inspiring future generations. Stay connected and get involved at lanterns.buzz for great radio. Get commentary and news of the day. Lanterns.buzz.
Welcome back to the Bells of Liberty on Lanterns Radio Network. It is time to go over our Constitutorial, where this week we will be discussing the Second Amendment. It's pretty straightforward. It's one line. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. It's a rather simple statement and pretty straightforward if you asked me, but in today's world, it is probably one of the most controversial statements in the history of the United States. The debate goes on a daily basis where people feel that the Second Amendment needs to be rewritten in order to limit or eliminate firearms in the country. What those who want to ban guns fail to understand is the context in which this amendment was crafted. You see, the founders had an innate distrust of armies because they knew that these could be used against the people, but they were also necessary as a ways to defend the nation against foreign countries. Militias would also be useful, but because militias were comprised of people who weren't soldiers, basically common folk, and they weren't properly trained like the military, they run the risk of doing more harm than good. However, in modern age, there are no militias here in the United States, and probably the closest thing to a militia would be the National Guard, and that is something that is currently under the power of each state. The way the Second Amendment was crafted was that there were two sides to the argument. The anti-federalist stands were the people who believed that each individual state should control the militia because they would be able to defend said state from federal oppression. And then there was the federalist stance, which were the people who believed that if each citizen was armed, then they'd be the ones to defend themselves as individuals, as opposed to arms being solely in the hands of a militia. Though the Second Amendment applies to the federal government, states do have the power to pass gun control regulations, which is something that we have seen in states like New York, Massachusetts, New Jersey, Maryland, California, and DC, which are some of the states that probably have the strictest gun laws. However, in the past few years, and luckily for those of us who enjoy our Second Amendment rights, the Supreme Court has determined that the Second Amendment protects the citizens' rights to possess a firearm, provided that it is used for lawful purposes such as self-defense, hunting, sport, and so on and so forth, and that it is not necessary for us to be part of a militia or any kind of military-related organization or law enforcement in order to possess a weapon. One of the arguments that we hear a lot as part of the phraseology that we sometimes hear from people on the other side of the aisle is phrases like common sense gun laws. But for people like us, what it really means is passing laws that will make it harder to obtain guns for people who want to use it lawfully. They fail to realize that implementing stricter gun laws than we already have in the books means that people looking to do evil will illegally obtain guns to commit violent crimes, while those who want to defend themselves will have to jump through hoops that are on fire while patting their head and rubbing their belly at the same time in order to get a weapon. You can ask any survivor of a violent crime, most of them are women and minorities, if having a firearm would have generated a different outcome in their lives, and I guarantee you that almost all of them, if not all, will say yes. Background checks are currently in place to monitor who purchases guns legally, and each state has a different waiting period. If a person fails to pass a very thorough federal background check, they will not get a firearm. It's those guns that are sold and purchased in the black market that aren't monitored at all, and people that claim that gun control and gun bans are effective, they should really take a look at countries like the UK, where even pepper spray, I didn't know this. In my research, I found out that in the UK, it's even illegal to have pepper spray. You cannot have pepper spray to defend yourself. And other countries like Japan and Australia and so on, violent crime may not be high, but it leaves their citizens with very little to no means to defend themselves against any attacks. And what they fail to understand is that you may not have guns to commit violent crimes, you're going to be using other things like guns, like axes, like cars, like bombs, and so on and so forth. So it doesn't matter what you do with regards to the Second Amendment, the more you try and change it, or the closer of a move you make to ban guns, people will find ways to commit violent crime, and eliminating guns isn't going to fix that problem.
Totally agree with that assessment. Essentially, I think we've determined on several occasions that just because the population of people is generally good does not mean that there aren't going to be people who will manage to find a weapon regardless of if it's banned or not. I think we've proven that time and time again with gangs and terrorists and things like that. They're going to find a way to get them. They exist. They're always going to exist. Whatever kind of weapon we have is always going to exist. So why would you intentionally keep the people who are not in gangs, who are not committing crimes, who are not terrorists, from being able to protect themselves when they have the opportunity to? Doesn't make any sense to me why you would do that. Plus, I think the government in general is supposed to be scared of the fact that the general population should be able to arm themselves, because then they're not as easy to round up and maintain in whatever fashion they want them to be maintained in. So I think that's a very important part of, at least in the world that we live in, that the people are able to maintain their own protection and to fight off whatever government interference might show up at their doorstep. I think we've seen that with, even in England, as innocuous as it might seem, it's like they're so under the thumb of the government there. You know, we saw that recently with Charlie Gard, and, you know, you're on NHS, you're on their dole, so that essentially means they get to tell you who lives, who dies, and when and why, and if they're willing to take care of you or not. So that's just an example of living under the thumb of a government. So being armed, I think, is essentially the next step on that. So Second Amendment is very important, and of course all the leftists are like, oh, they meant if there was a militia. What militia are you a part of? Okay.
Or what
Shut
they
up.
really meant to say was muskets. I'm like, no, please don't be so naive and think honestly. It's like at the time that the founders wrote the Second Amendment, there was such a thing as, I guess not assault rifle, because I guess it wasn't an assault rifle, but there were other weapons that weren't necessarily muskets that would have proven to be more dangerous than a musket.
And they weren't dumb enough to think that in the future there wouldn't be more. Not, I guess for them it would be futuristic, that there wouldn't be some improvements made, that it would be more than what they currently had. Some of the most brilliant men in the world wrote our Constitution. You don't think they thought, like freaking Ben Franklin? How many things did that man invent? You don't think he knew that they were going to come up with better examples of the weapons that they had? Give me a break. So, you know, it's like, okay, well, I guess then we should never have moved on to typewriters and then computers and so on and so forth, because the Constitution was written with a quill and some paper.
It's funny because they always talk about, you know, banning assault rifles and banning, you know, semi-automatic weapons. It's like that's not going to do anything. Look at your local news, listeners, and tell me how many robberies and carjackings and home burglaries have been committed in that week, and tell me which of those criminals have an assault rifle or a semi-automatic weapon in their hand. Most of them are handguns. So when you're talking about gun bans, you're really talking about handguns. And these are probably like the most popular, particularly with people who have concealed carry, who are concealed carry holders. Those are the weapons that people use. So when you talk about gun bans, you're not talking about, you know, AR-15s, which to you people, you know, everything's an AR-15. Heck, my pen is an AR-15 for some of you, because you can't tell the difference between one and the other. But the majority of a violent crime that's committed that you'll see in the news is mostly handguns.
Well, and how many violent crimes have we seen get stopped by people who were concealed carry people, like had concealed carry licenses or permits? I'm sorry, I can't speak today. You know, how many go
unreported?
Yeah, because that doesn't fit with the narrative that guns are bad. Because there is actually proof that someone who is a concealed carry person who has gone through training is a responsible gun owner. Like, you know, they make fun of us for using that term, but they are responsible and they save people's lives. They save police. They save just normal run-of-the-mill people. You never hear about it, and yet it's actually quite a significant number.
If there's one thing that always sticks in the back of my mind is, do you remember the story from a couple of years ago of Lee Rigby? I think that was his name, the soldier in the UK, that he was minding his own business, walking down the street. He gets run over by a car. He gets attacked by two men. He's almost beheaded with a cleaver, and he's stabbed to death. And this poor guy died with absolutely no means of defending himself. And these people didn't use guns. These people used the equivalent of butcher knives and kitchen knives, and they killed him. So how exactly how did that turn out for Lee Rigby and for his family, that he wasn't able to defend himself because the UK has banned guns? He would have stood a chance if he would have had a gun on him, or if someone walking down the street that had something, akin to a concealed carry permit in the UK would have seen what was going on and would have tried or attempted to stop and do something.
Well, even their police aren't armed. That's the thing. I mean, unless they've got a special forces team that comes in and takes care of stuff. I mean, look at the terrorist attacks that they dealt with this year. Mm-hmm. One of the officers that went in to help people, he was stabbed multiple times. Mm-hmm. A police officer was stabbed multiple times by the terrorists because he did not have a gun. He did not have a weapon with which to defend himself. All he had was a baton. Mm-hmm. How many terrorists are walking around the streets right now going, well, guess what? This will be easy. I mean, they're using freaking cars to run babies over.
Exactly.
So, you know what? Exactly. You need to arm your citizens. Protect yourselves from these lunatics, these people who are screaming Allahu Akbar, and yet we don't know what their reasoning for running people over with cars is.
It's yet to be determined, Jaina, don't you know?
I know, right? It's yet to be determined. It's always yet to be determined. Oh, we don't really know what this person was doing this for. But, when it's a white supremacist, we know. We know why.
Exactly. All right, so we've run out of time, but don't worry, we'll be back because our next segment is Ring the Bell. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Bells of Liberty on Lanterns Radio Network. It is time to ring the bell. And Jaina has the latest poll results from last week's stories. Jaina?
All right. So some of the polls that we had last week in regards to our Ring the Bells were, would you joyride with a bear? This is in regards to Sammy's story about a bear who pretty much hijacked a car and then decided to crap in it. 60% of you said, I'll be your boo-boo. All right, let's go get in the picnic basket for 60% of you. And 40% of you said no. Well, you're boring. I mean,
you're
who wouldn't
no fun.
Want to joyride with a bear that's pooping in your car, but whatevs. Next up is Rocky's treadmill dancing story about the mom in England who was just trying to lose a little weight while shaking her thang and got in trouble. 43% of you said, yeah, I'd dance on a treadmill if it's safe. 50% of you said, you'll break a leg. I agree with that. I voted for I'll probably break a leg because I have no groove whatsoever. So didn't seem like a safe thing to do.
I'm unfriending you.
Well, that wouldn't be the first time tonight that you've said that. So, oh, right in the heart. Anyway, next up was my story. Obviously the best story, the greatest stories, the greatest of all stories, the best, the most wonderful, most beautiful story about the $1,300 blow-up Trump chicken. We asked, would you spend $1,300 on a blow-up chicken that looked like Donald Trump? 24% of you said Trump is evil. Yeah, I guess I could agree with that. And 76% of you said give me some Chick-fil-A. I vote Chick-fil-A. We should go get some waffle fries, guys. Good idea.
That number should have been higher because I don't think I know anybody who hates Chick-fil-A.
Well,
I hate Chick-fil-A.
Unfriended. I'm going to have no friends by the end of this episode.
Get out.
You guys don't understand. We didn't have one, and then we got one, so the hype was really high, and then I tried it, and I'm like, it's not that good.
When they open like that and there's a lot of business, like the food quality starts kind of low, but then it gets better once there's a normal flow of traffic. I've experienced this myself.
Maybe I'll have to try one now that I'm in Oklahoma.
There's going to be more. Gonna say, are you in civilization where they have a Chick-fil-A? Because I kind of feel like maybe not.
It's like an hour away.
Okay, so no. The answer is no. All right, answered my own question. There we go. All right, well, moving on to our latest Ring the Bell. Sammy, you're up first.
Okay, so this drives me bananas. So Governor Kate Brown of Oregon signed a law this week that provides free abortions for all, citizens and non-citizens alike, by forcing insurance companies to cover abortion, saying that Oregon taxpayers will pick up the $10.2 million tab, 500 of which is allocated specifically for illegal immigrants. The state already pays, before this bill passed, the state was already paying $2 million a year to provide abortions. And this quote drove me crazy. So this is from the Advocacy Director for Planned Parenthood Advocates of Oregon. Her name is Laurel Swerdlow. And she said, women, transgender women, and gender nonconforming individuals, people of color, immigrants, and people of faith are not going to silently stand around while politicians in D.C. try to take away their health care. People of faith are for this? No, you're crazy, lady.
Abortion is not health care.
You know, as if it's not bad enough that they are even supporting this, it's now we also have to pay for illegal immigrants who shouldn't even be here in the first place. We're paying for them to not have anchor babies. Shut up. Get out of here with that nonsense.
When as I was reading it, the article I was reading was talking about how they don't really have any standard anymore for abortion. So basically you go into Oregon, you don't have to give them any information. They provide the abortion. So people from other states can start coming in. I mean, this is going to sink Oregon if it's as popular as they say it is. Like, because people in southern Washington, they're pretty low on the income scale. They're poor. So they're just across the border because they can just go over the bridge into Portland. So it'll be interesting how this plays out. But on a bright note, before we get even more upset, in Texas, the same week, Greg Abbott signed a bill that bars insurers from covering elective abortions, adding that if people want to pay an additional premium, they can get abortion coverage, but it's not something that can come standard on Texas plans. So Go Texas.
Exactly. Rooting for that. I've just determined that Oregon itself just needs to sink into the sea somehow. Like, just pick it up and throw it into the ocean, and maybe it will capsize like Guam, because it just sounds like every story that comes out of this state just proves that it's terrible.
Absolutely agree.
All right. Well, moving on with the insanity, I elected to talk about even more delightfulness. In Tennessee, apparently protesters have started to dig up the body of Nathan Bedford Forrest, a lieutenant general in the Confederate Army. They've started with a symbolic patch of grass, but if they don't get what they want soon, they're going to dig it deeper. All right, let me just explain something here. The Civil War ended a while ago, all right? This guy has been dead for 140 years. You are still triggered by a man who has not been alive for 140 years. Was he a good man? No. He was not a good man. In fact, there's a lot of speculation that perhaps he was one of the founding members of the Ku Klux Klan, that he did some pretty terrible things at places like Fort Pillow. I am not going to disagree that this person is not a good person, was obviously a racist, and was obviously in the Confederacy because he believed slavery was okay. I'm not disagreeing with that. However, he has not actually physically been capable of bringing these people pain because he's dead. Well, you know what? As we discussed yesterday, Rocky, The Walking Dead is not actually a documentary. So
it's not?
I don't think any lieutenant generals of the Confederate Army are going to be raising from the dead anytime soon and bring back slavery. They're upset because there has been legislation to exhume his body. I don't really know where they'd end up moving him. I don't know that I really care. The fact of the matter is this man is dead. Let him rest in peace. He's moved on to whatever plane he's deserved to go to. His judgment's pretty much been set in stone. Move on.
Isn't he the guy that Forrest Gump was supposedly named after? Because the founder of the Ku Klux Klan was in Forrest Gump's, in the movie, was in his lineage, and so that's why his name is Forrest.
Oh, yeah, I think so.
That's just what my brain automatically went to. I love Forrest Gump. So.
It's like I honestly don't know what these people expect to gain from doing bat crap crazy things like these. Let's invest our time in better things. Like my story, for example. This has been a tough week for everyone. I think we can all agree on that. So it was time to bring a story that will make you warm and fuzzy and perhaps restore your faith in humanity just a little bit. So a story came out over the weekend out of Bradenton, Florida. A grandmother was hosting her 5 grandkids, ages 5 through 15, thereabouts, for a sleepover on the weekend before school started. For those of us who live in Florida, if there are any listeners, hi everyone. We started school August 10th. The tragedy struck when the mother of the kids went back to the family home to get the kids' school supplies and clothes and everything that they would need for that week to start school, and found that the home had been burglarized. You guys, they took absolutely everything. They took food, clothes, backpacks full of school supplies. They even took the kids' they even took the dirty clothes. They even took the dirty clothes that were in the laundry basket. These poor kids actually had to miss their first day of school because other than the literal clothes on their backs, that's all they had. But thanks to the community and to a local pastor from a church in Sarasota, his name is Lelville Lumpkin, and he is with the church called Light of the World International Church. They stepped up and helped with some donations. There still are missing a few things, as I am sure they are, because everything was taken away from them. But the community did step up to help this family, and I just the story definitely moved me, and it made me feel happy to see that the community stepped up to help this family. And sometimes that's what I love about humanity, is that sometimes they make us think that there's no hope for the future. And then when you find a story like this, it just makes you feel like the sun will come out again. That is, of course, until Monday when we have the solar eclipse, which I hope y'all are ready for.
Don't look directly into it, you moron.
I'm going to look directly into it. I'm going to let you know if I go blind. I don't need my eyes to do radio.
Oh, no, you don't.
But you do need them to read the articles.
Yeah, you're a special kind of special. All right. Well, I think that's all we have for this week. Of course, as you should already know, especially if you're listening right now, our show drops every Saturday on Lanterns Radio Network at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. We're available on Spreaker, SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play Music, and as we got to announce last week, we're now on iHeartRadio, so plenty of places for you to listen to our delightful commentary, whether it's live or if you've had to miss us when we post the show. We throw a party, a podcast party, that is, every Saturday on Twitter at Bells of Liberty, where you can find brand new polls for our Ring the Bell topics to participate in. The girls and I tweet along with you and the show to further the discussion on our segments and anything else we might want to mention, and gifts, so many gifts to make the discussion even more fun. So you can also find us on Facebook at The Bells of Liberty, where we post not only the links to our show, but links and memes to articles, things that are happening during the week, and also our midweek chimes, where one of us takes a few minutes to talk about something we think needs to be addressed that's going on in the world and can't wait until Saturday. This past Wednesday, Rocky's Midweek Chime centered on Iceland sharing data that they've eliminated Down syndrome almost entirely from their population, but while on their soapbox, did fail to mention that they've done so by promoting abortion to women who have found through testing that it's likely their unborn baby will be born with the condition. Isn't that clever? And we leave the conversation open for you so you can always comment and say your piece. Next week, we'll be hearing from Sammy.
First one.
It's Sammy's first one.
Pop open a bottle of champagne.
Tell me what to talk about.
As you can see, she's really excited.
I'll talk about my eyelashes. People can finally see what I do to you guys.
Oh my goodness. All right, so we'll definitely be on the lookout for that, because I can't wait to hear about the Asian dollar store eyelashes. Didn't even know that was a thing until last week.
we have for you.
I did not know. So anyway, feel free to join us on social media. We're always there. We have no life, just the Twitter and the Book of Face. So keep in touch, and we'll see you next Saturday.
Bye.
See ya.
Thanks for listening to the Bells of Liberty podcast. Want to listen to more sassy content? All shows are available free on demand on Spreaker, SoundCloud, iTunes, and Google Play Music. Have something to say? You can find us on Twitter @Bells of Liberty and also on Facebook, www.facebook.com/The Bells of Liberty. And as always, keep calm and ring on.